Today's episode of The Bearded Home Cook is a little extra special because not only am I showing you one of our family's favorite recipes, which happens to be for risotto, but I've also brought in a special guest to help out. Let's get ready to cook. So today we're going to make a lemon basil risotto in honor of Shelby, who's getting ready to graduate college. It's one of those recipes that her and I made together for quite a long time. It was part of actually a Make-A-Wish trip that she was going to do. And we came up with this recipe to impress a certain someone, and I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. In the meanwhile, I've got her working on zesting up that lemon. Pretty simple process. You're just trying to get the yellow rind off the outside of the lemon. You don't want the white part on the inside because that's where a lot of the bitterness is going to come from. The zest itself has fragrant oils and delicious flavors that really help the lemon pop in a dish, especially with something like risotto, where it's very creamy and cheesy. This is going to have that acid that's going to help break it a little bit and give you a different flavor. So we're going to let her keep zesting, and we're going to come right back. So real quick before we go too far, I did want to bring you in close so you could see that the lemon still has some of the lemon zest on it. Some of that outer rind, because we don't want to go so far as to get into the white right here. That's the bitter stuff I mentioned. Over here, we've got some beautiful fragrant zest. You can see it's glistening because it's full of those natural citrus oils that are going to release in the risotto and give us that bright lemon flavor we're looking for. I've got two pans on the stove. One is a small sauce pot that's going to hold about 6 cups of liquid. The other one is a very large saute pan that we're going to cook the risotto in. Now in this sauce pot is already 2 cups of water, and I'm going to add 4 cups of vegetable stock. The idea is I want a diluted vegetable stock because even though it's going to help flavor the rice during the cooking process, I don't want it to taste like a specific vegetable. You'll notice several recipes online call for either a low sodium chicken stock or sometimes they call for water. You know my opinion on water is there's no flavor in it, so I'm not giving this anything that's going to help enhance the flavors or set a base layer. But because the risotto is finishing with basil and lemon, I don't want to put too much of a flavor in there. So where some call for onions and shallots to be sauteed in the pan, those leave, again, a very oniony flavor in the finished product. The lemon and the basil need to be the stars of the show at the end. So a very diluted vegetable stock, low in sodium, is going to help us control the salt while we add some flavor. Okay, so next up I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to this pan, and we're going to go ahead and get it fired up. And the idea is we want to just lightly toast the risotto, the rice, in the pan to give it that little bit of a nutty flavor. And I keep saying risotto and I just said rice, so I'm going to explain a little bit more about the rice and what it is that makes it so different right over here. So the photo I just showed you shows 3 different types of rice, and I wanted to explain them all a little bit so you would understand why risotto is so unique and creates this wonderful dish. So risotto in Italian literally translates to little rice. It's an arboreal rice grown very specific for this type of dish because the grain is extremely short and it's extremely plump. So as you look at it, you're going to notice that these really look almost like pearls. And the idea is in the pearl of this rice is all of the starch and the protein that as you slowly cook it, it's going to extract into the liquid, and that's going to create the creamy, wonderful dish that we know as risotto. Contrastly, we have basmati rice. Very slender, very delicious rice, but definitely would not create this creamy dish. So this is used when you're looking for a very perfect cooked rice underneath a protein, maybe something Mediterranean or Asian. We use this all the time in the house, but it would never make a risotto dish. Last is unfortunately something I grew up on, and it is instant rice. This stuff is probably the least nutritious rice on the planet because it cooks in 60 to 90 seconds thanks to this process at a plant. All of the nutrients, all of the starches, everything that could be beneficial for this rice has gone down the drain so that you can cook it in a minute to a minute and a half. Please don't try to use this in anything that I make here on the Bearded Home Cook because homemade easy with quality ingredients is what we want to do. So now we're going to get back over to the stove because that stock's about ready and that oil is heated up. Okay, as you can see, the stock is steaming, which means I'm going to lower the temperature down to about a medium heat. We want it to be hot when it goes into the risotto pan, but we don't want it to be boiling because otherwise it's going to alter the entire cooking process. We want to do everything slow and low. This is going to be about a 20 to 25 minute process. You can't speed it up with heat, so we have to follow a process. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a ladle, set it over here on my stock pot in preparation of adding the first bit. Now over here I've got my oil, and as I've mentioned in the past, I like to see legs. So as I swirl it around, it's warm, it's very thin. You know that it's ready to get the addition of the rice. we're going to add the rice to create the nuttiness into the oil and let it saute just a little bit, as I mentioned earlier. We don't want to change the color. We don't want to brown it. We just want to put the very lightest of toast on it so that it creates this little nutty character before we make our first addition to the stock. I'm going to cut in and out every several minutes because you really don't want to watch me stir for 20 to 25 minutes, but I promise you won't miss anything important, so I'll be back in just a minute. What we're doing is we're actually cooking the rice a little, as I mentioned. You can hear the sizzle. The other thing I want you to notice is see how you can see the pan through the bottom? This rice is still at its smallest stage. Just wait till we start coming back in here so you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, so as we add the stock a couple of ladles at a time, to not mess up the kitchen, I go ahead and pull it over. I'm just going to drag this ladle across and put just a couple in, so probably the equivalent of about 3/4 of a cup. So maybe 2 or 3 ladles at a time as we go. I'm going to give it a nice little stir. You can hear it still simmering. Something else I wanted to mention too is this is a very thick walled pan. And you may say, why is that important? Well, if you think about some of those aluminum pans that you've used, maybe they're Teflon coated and they were very inexpensive. Those don't have a lot of weight to them because they don't have a lot of metal to them. And so the heat doesn't distribute properly. You're going to have hot spots like right above the flame or right above your heating element. So a thick walled pan is going to give you a much better distribution of heat, which is going to help something like this not scorch and really cook to its fullest without having to worry too much about your temperature other than just right here at the knob. You can see in the middle all the bubbles. You can also see the white of the kernels themselves. So as this cooks through, you're going to notice those disappear. And of course, it's going to absorb all that liquid and they're going to get significantly larger. Okay, so when that liquid gets low, we're going to go ahead and get another 2 or 3 ladles going on in here. And I really just sort of play it by ear. You want to make sure that none of the rice is uncovered when you've added the liquid. So you're going to go ahead and probably add 2, 2.5, maybe 3. Give it a stir, see where we're at. This is right on the money. And just give it a little bit more time to cook. So while that's cooking, I did want to mention a little story to you because I did mention that this is a family recipe and it kind of has a really neat story behind it. So Shelby was diagnosed with leukemia at 16 years old. As you can tell, she's great. She's getting ready to graduate college. We're thrilled to death. But we did have the opportunity to do a Make-A-Wish trip. And Make-A-Wish is a wonderful organization that we've partnered with now for the last several years since Shelby's trip, because that was probably about 5.5 years ago. And the cool part was we went on the set of Hell's Kitchen because there might be a celebrity chef that she really likes at that time and still does, of course. They stay in touch as a matter of fact, so he's a super cool guy. But the idea was if we're going to be on the backstage of the show, we're going to go eat whatever that might be. We really didn't know. We wanted to have something that's like our family dish. And so we tried to come up with different things that we thought would be fun to talk about. And of course, if you've ever watched the show, beef Wellington and risotto are the 2 things you're going to see every single time. Well, we weren't ready to try and make Wellington at the time, so we made some risotto and tried a couple of different things and came up with this lemon basil risotto thinking, well, maybe we're going to talk to him about it. Sure enough, we're backstage where everybody's eating together and having a good time after the show taped, and what do you think he asks? But hey, Shelby, what do you guys like to make in the kitchen? So we had a wonderful recipe and a story about it to share with him and how that inspired us to make it. And now this has become a family tradition in our house. So we love this recipe. I hope you love this recipe. We're going to let this simmer a little bit more and I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, so I've brought my sous chef back in to grate some cheese.
Hi.
And what I wanted to do was focus on one important ingredient that we finish with. So we're going to finish with the lemon zest. Of course, we're going to finish with basil because it's in the recipe. But we also finish with Parmesan cheese. And as I've told you in the past, we don't want to use packaged Parmesan cheese because of the anti-caking agents and additives. So we want to buy a block of Parmesan cheese at the store, get out our cheese grater, maybe get our human cheese grater, and let's get this cheese ready to go for the finish. We'll be right back. Okay, I've pulled our pot nice and close again to get some more liquid going in here. And the one thing you're going to notice too is that you have to slowly turn down the heat on your stock because as the volume goes down, the temperature is going to rise quickly with that less liquid in there. But at the same time, your risotto pan may need you to adjust it up just a little bit to keep the simmer going because the volume in here now has grown exponentially with the rice. So I'm going to bring you in really close in a second so you can see what the rice is doing, and then we're going to do one more final preparation for our finishing ingredients. Okay, as we pull in close this time, you're going to notice that not only has the rice volume gone up significantly, we can no longer see the pan, but the kernels themselves are significantly bigger. You can still see the white, so we know we have some work to do, but the idea is, again, this is a 20 to 25 minute process, so we don't want to rush to try and make that white go away. We want it to be done exactly when it's done. So here at the cutting board, I've rolled up 12 basil leaves. And what I'm gonna do is run my knife through very narrow cuts and create these beautiful little ribbons of basil. You'll get a much better look here in just a second, but as you go, make sure you run the knife all the way through so they don't stick together. So this is what we're going to add at the end. So if you look, we are super close. There's probably about 2 or 3 ladles left in the pot. You'll notice that the rice is significantly larger, that the liquid is no longer thin, but it's establishing a thicker viscosity, not quite to a gravy yet, but it's gonna be there by the time we're all done. And you'll also notice that there isn't as much white in the rice. So we've done a great job of cooking it slowly, extracting the starches, and it'll be done here probably in the next few minutes. We're gonna taste it to check first, and then we'll be able to add our other ingredients. So I'll see you right back here. So something I've done is I've started to line up the finishing ingredients closest to the pan in order of use. I'm gonna use that lemon that we zested earlier to put a little bit of lemon juice in. And what we wanna do is have each thing lined up. So as soon as that's ready, I'm gonna go from lemons to lemon zest to cheese to basil to plate. Okay, we've been at it for about 23 minutes now, and I've saved you several minutes of just watching me stir. I've kept about 1 ladle of the stock in the pan because I don't want to add it all, even though the recipe calls for 6 cups. If I put all of it in there and the rice is fully cooked, I have all that extra liquid, there's no way to get it back out. I'd much rather adjust by adding some in than worrying about how on earth I'm going to get it out. So the rice itself doesn't have any more white on it. I have enough liquid in there I can see, so all the ingredients are going to incorporate well. So you want to get 2 spoons out, and we're going to taste right now for doneness. We're not looking for seasoning, and I'll tell you why in just a second. The rice has just a little bit of a chewy, like an al dente, which is perfect in Italian cuisine. It's wonderfully cooked. The other part of it is it's going to cook a little bit further as we're adding ingredients. So we want to get the heat off at this point, and then we're going to start adding our ingredients. Now, right away, we're going to go with our lemon juice. I will say if you have a little colander like this, or if you have one of those nets that goes around the lemon, what you're going to find is that lemon seeds look just like risotto rice. So it will be impossible to fish these back out afterwards, and you certainly don't want somebody to chip a tooth on it. That would kind of ruin the meal a little bit. Okay, lemon is in, lemon zest is in. Let's go for a quick stir, because we want to make sure that each ingredient has time to incorporate. So we're going to get this in quickly. What I'm noticing already is that I do have a little bit less liquid than I had just a minute ago, so the rice has soaked it up. We're going to make a very small adjustment here, because we do have to add the cheese still. So we don't want there to not be enough liquid for the cheese to create a very creamy risotto. In goes the cheese, about a half a cup. Continue to stir. Even though we are off the heat, the rice itself is extremely hot. So it is taking care of melting that cheese. You can smell the bouquet of the lemon, that lemon zest, those oils are releasing in the heat. You get a little bit of that cheese fragrance right now, and it's creating a wonderful looking dish, and I'll show you here in just 1 second. And then we're gonna go in with our basil. Beautiful. This you wanna stir in quickly. You don't wanna over stir, because then you're gonna start to rip those ribbons. And part of the presentation is the bright green ribbons from the basil. So we wanna go ahead and just do a few laps with the spatula here and get this into a bowl. Okay, so I've got some beautiful risotto right here in the bowl. I'm just gonna go ahead and add just a sprinkle of that Parmesan cheese. And then I've cut off a little bud off of the basil plant just to give it that extra beautiful little garnish. And what are you doing stealing my risotto? Okay, I stole her fork and I got the risotto back so we can finish talking. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. Make sure you also tag us on all your social media channels at Bearded Home Cook so we can see what you're cooking. Hopefully it's this risotto dish, but try some different variations of it. Share it with some family and friends and have lots of fun. And in the meanwhile, bon appetit.